Cool. So we're going to do that bit first.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm getting, just a flag, I'm getting what sounds almost like road noise from somebody.
Oh, it's my windows open. I'm in the little sweat box. Don't make me close.
Oh, fucking hell, Jen. She's like, oh, whose noise is that? Oh, my window's open.
I can hear some wiring in your background. It's your loud computer. There's like fucking traffic going past.
I can hear the fan on your laptop, actually.
Stop it.
It's hot in here.
Welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for people that like to chat books. Today we have a very special episode for you, an episode with all four of us. Yes, that's happening. We have lined up 4 people, 3 time zones, and 1 newborn baby to bring you this fun little episode. So, hello everyone, I guess first of all. Congratulations, Jen. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really nice to be back recording. Editing's not going to happen for a while, just to warn you. But yeah. Recording for an hour or 2 I can just about manage. Might get handed a baby at some point, but then you can meet him, so it's fine.
Yeah, we're quite happy for special guest babies to join the podcast recording.
So, I thought what we could do first of all, guys, since we're all 4 here, is we could introduce ourselves a little bit, since I know we have quite a lot of new listeners to the pod. So a big hello to you if you're new or if you're old, so you can get to know us a little bit more and hear how we all came to be sitting here together, I guess, on this Sunday afternoon. I'll just knock my furniture over. Do you want to go first, Alice? Do you want to start?
Oh, we can do. I suppose that's alphabetical, isn't it?
Yeah, you're just top left. And you're my favourite, obviously, so...
Yes! It's on record, so it's confirmed. Anyway, so I'm Alice. I live in London. I can't ever remember a time when I didn't love books. I have this memory, which I think is when I learned to read, in that I remember sitting there with a book and it suddenly making sense. And apparently I was about 2 at the time, which is a bit weird and very early. So I'm not sure if this is a real memory or if this actually is what happened. But apparently I did actually learn to read at the same time as my older brother, who's like 2.5 years older than me. So regardless, I was quite young. And I just love it. It's the best. Books are always there when you need them. There's always something. And I'm glad I get to chat books with you lovely people on a regular basis.
So my name is Chris. I don't really know when I started reading or even when I really got into it, but I didn't really consider myself to be an avid reader until I was 21 is when I got really into reading. It had been something that I had always enjoyed in my life as kind of this on and off hobby, My dad was very much the type of dad that wanted us to be readers, and so he would take us to the library every Saturday and stuff. But I didn't become properly obsessed until I was in my early 20s. And I moved to a city where I was within walking distance of 2 bookstores, which was very bad for my entry-level salary, but very good for my budding inner bibliophile. I just started reading a ton that year. And it's just been something I've done ever since quite avidly. And I love talking about books. So if you don't know, I have a YouTube channel where I've talked about books now for the past 5 years, and that's Chris Bookish Cauldron. And yeah, I love talking to people about books, love reading books. It's just the jam, the bee's knees.
The cat's pajamas, as my dad used to say. Your YouTube channel is normally in the show notes, but I will put it yet again. But if people haven't seen it, they should check it out.
Gotta get that plug in.
Get that plug in. Like you never mentioned the podcast on your YouTube videos. Don't think I haven't clocked that, Chris. I've noticed.
I need to fit it in somehow.
Do you want to go next, Jen?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jenny. I currently live in Norwich in England, but I hail from South Wales. I'm a little bit like Chris, really. I didn't discover a love of reading until I left university. So I think I'd always enjoyed reading. I remember reading as a child. I remember not reading as a teenager and not reading at uni. And then when I left, I don't really know how I started really getting into it. I think I discovered Goodreads, It wasn't owned by Amazon then. And yeah, it just picked up from there, really. And I did English literature all through school. So that is probably the only reading I read up until I finished uni. I love talking about books, definitely. And it's, like Alice said, it's great getting to chat books with you guys on a regular basis, because I don't have that many people in my actual like day-to-day life that read like we do. So yes, it's very nice chatting to you a lot.
So you studied English lit at university too?
No. No, I sacked it off before uni. No, I found it really hard and really frustrating. So no, I did geography at uni.
I actively chose not to do English literature at A-level, which is like the last couple of years of school in the UK, because there were some books on the curriculum that I really wanted to read and enjoy, and I found that anything I read in school and just dissected, I ended up hating, and I was like, I don't want that to happen to like all of Jane Austen and various other interesting books. So I chose not to do it, much to my teacher's disappointment, because I was like really good at English literature at school.
I like them again now, and now I appreciate the fact that I studied them. But at the time, yeah, totally that. I ended up hating every single book that we did and just not enjoying English lessons, English lit at all.
Yeah, I also didn't do English lit. I avoided it completely by doing... I think I had to study religion and philosophy instead, because I didn't want to do... exactly the same. I didn't want to write these long form things. I didn't want to think about the same book for like a whole semester. I was like, no, not for me. So I'm Sarah. I'm Australian, but I've lived in the Netherlands for about 5 years now. I am like Alice, actually. I've always been really into reading, and I also learnt really, really young, when I was 3 or so, I think, or 4. My grandmother taught me how to read, which is kind of funny because she was Dutch, so she didn't speak English natively, or even that well at the time when she taught me how to read. So I don't know how she managed to teach me how to read in English, but she did. So yeah, I've always been a huge reader, like all the way through school, and in high school it's always been, a big part of my life. And I do have a lot of people in my life who read a lot because I run a book club, but yeah, I still really like talking to you guys. Cool. So Jen or Alice, either of you guys started the podcast, so do you want to like explain yourselves what happened?
Explain yourselves.
It was 2017 that we started.
Which is ridiculous when you think about it.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, we weren't regular uploaders until, Sarah, you started, really. There was probably only about 15 episodes before 2020. We just used to upload when we could get together, really. But I had a YouTube channel probably before Chris started now. I enjoyed it, but there was always something about it I didn't quite enjoy. Every now and again, Alice used to record a video with me, and when me and Alice recorded together, I loved it. And watching those videos back, I could just tell that, 1, I did better talking to someone else, and 2, we just bounced off each other really nicely. I don't remember the point where we decided that we would start a podcast.
I remember you texting me and saying...
Did I float it by you?
Yeah, you were just like, I have this idea, I really want to start a book podcast, and I think it'd be better if we did it together. What do you think? And I was like, oh yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing.
Absolutely no idea. Not a
like
clue.
All these podcasts that have like proper launches and plan stuff out, we didn't even know how you recorded. I didn't know what equipment you needed. I didn't know how you edited an episode. We were just like, let's just do it, with no idea what we were doing, literally just winging it.
Yeah, to be honest though, I think 2017, that was kind of before podcasts really took off. Like, I feel like it's only in the last like 2 or 3 years that this kind of like launch thing has really become a thing where people have their whole brand.
See, I think it's actually earlier than that. I think it was around 2017 that things were really kicking off, because I got really into podcasts with, as I think a lot of people did, with Serial, which was out in 2014.
Same.
I'd never really listened to a podcast before Serial. Someone was like, oh, you've got to listen to this thing. It's called a podcast, and you have to listen to this specific one. And from there, I got really into listening to them. And I used to walk to and from work. And that was maybe like 45 minutes each way. So I had a lot of time for listening. So when Jenny approached me about it, I was like, I know exactly what this is. But I had, as Jenny says, I had no idea how you did it, but I at least knew what she was talking about.
Do you know what? I think, because I don't think I listened to podcasts at the time. This is how ridiculous it is. If you want to start a podcast, literally just start, because you don't need to know what you're doing. I don't think I even listened to podcasts at the time. I'm pretty sure that Lauren from Lauren and the Books and Mercedes did a podcast that they did on YouTube, but it was just the two of them talking to each other. And I think
Books and Blankets.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were doing that before, and that's where I got the idea from.
It was really cozy, but a little podcast.
Yeah, that was a good podcast. I'll link that.
I think that like going into something like that a little bit blind is sometimes a little bit helpful. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're the type of person who's going to find that really stressful, don't put that on yourself. Sometimes if you know all of the challenges that are ahead of you, you're going to be overwhelmed by fear and just not do it. And it's better to just like take it one step at a time and learn something instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get this equipment and I got to get this software and I got to do this, that, and the other thing. Like, you're going to overwhelm yourself. Figure out what you want to talk about, and the rest will sort itself out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's definitely sometimes best to not know what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, also you might hate it. Don't waste all this time and money getting all this equipment and stuff if you record 3 episodes and you think, I absolutely hate this. So yeah, definitely see if it's something you even want to do at the beginning, I would say. And yeah, I totally agree. You probably don't want to know how much work it is to edit and stuff at the beginning. You probably want to go in optimistically thinking, this is not going to be effortful at all, and then find out later once you're already invested. Yes, I joined like 2020, I joined this podcast. So I can't remember how I found your podcast.
You mean it's not burned into your memory?
It's not the life-affirming moment that you wish it were, I'm afraid.
Heartbroken.
I know. I think it must have been also through Books and Blankets or something, because I remember listening to that podcast as well. So maybe Lauren shouted you out or something, Jen, because I knew about your YouTube channel. Anyway, so somehow I found your podcast. And around 2018 as well, I also started listening to a lot of podcasts. After this one, I thought I didn't listen to it that often, but maybe it was just your upload schedule. I don't know. And then in 2020, actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was stuck in Australia for a plethora of reasons. And this was just after my dad had passed away. And so I was cleaning out all of his stuff, basically, because we were moving my mum from the house that I grew up in, which is really quite big, to the house that she lives in now, which is much, much smaller. So she had to downsize completely drastically. At the time, my mother wasn't very well, so it was kind of my job to do all that kind of cleaning. And I really needed something to listen to that was just like a background thing that would sort of keep me company while I pored sadly over like post-it notes and all that kind of shit that happens when someone dies. And I ended up listening to your whole back catalogue, and this was like in March 2020. And just coincidentally, that's when you put out the episode saying that you wanted a new co-host, if you remember. So then I sent you like, I think in my email to you, I called it an audition tape.
Probably.
Yeah. I think tongue-in-cheek, I'm sure. Yeah, and then I sent you a recording. And then you said I could join. I just finished my master's and I was like, yeah, I want to do something fun that's not super science related and book related.
Yeah, and here we are, like not that far off 3 years later.
Yeah, two and a half years later, which is amazing. You kind of really helped whip us into shape, Sarah.
Yeah, we would never, me and Alice, discuss getting more hosts in because, not that you want to be successful, but I think we do have a fairly successful book podcast now and we just couldn't do it. Actually, we couldn't generate enough content, just the two of us. So, yeah, it was really great to get more people involved. And like you say, even just the editing side of it, even the production side of it, is quite a lot of work. And the more of you that you have to help with that, the better, really.
I was a really late comer. I've only been doing this, about a year now?
Yeah.
I had kind of a soft entrance, though, because I guess because, like, I didn't, like, join in as a host. Like, I just kind of started doing some guest episodes.
We tricked you into it, basically.
Yeah. It wasn't much of a tricking because I really wanted to do it. So I'm trying to remember how I think I got started because I had been listening to your guys' podcast, and then I did a video where I was recommending book podcasts because I listened to a ton of them. And I mentioned you guys, and I didn't know that I think Sarah was one of my subscribers.
And me.
Oh, and Jenny. Okay, cool.
You're famous.
Yeah. And so I had no idea that you guys were subscribed, because I don't think, like, the usernames wouldn't have given away that there was some link to this podcast. And so after I mentioned you guys, Sarah reached out about doing a My Life in Books episode, and I did that, and I had so much fun. Like, that was really nice. I felt like we just hit it off. It was a really great conversation, and I just had fun, like, kind of doing more of a bit of a long form discussion about books that I couldn't really do on the channel. And then I got invited back to do a fantasy episode. And, like, after the fantasy episode, I remember thinking, I hope they ask me to just kind of do this as a regular thing because this was a lot of fun. And then around the time Sarah left the podcast, the other Sarah, I got to join in full time. And it's been really great ever since.
What happened is we had a little chat behind your back at that point as to how we could get you involved more.
Also, Chris, you're like, Sarah commented coolly on your video. Behind the scenes, that's not what happened. I like sent a screenshot. I was like, oh my god. I was like hyperventilating because it was just a random in the wild mention. I had no idea that you knew us. It was so weird. Yeah, that was great. It was all very fortuitous, actually, the way that all lined up without us really doing anything.
Very organic.
Yeah,
actually.
which is nice.
All right, wicked. So now we've got a bunch of questions that our listeners very kindly sent into us. Okay, question 1. What book or series do you wish there was more of? Presumably this means which series do you wish was longer?
Or I suppose which book do you wish was a series?
I'm going to be like the worst cliche about this, but it's just the obvious choice. And hopefully me and Sarah don't have the same exact answer, but...
Oh, is it going to be Robin Hobb?
Yes, the more Robin Hobb, but actually specifically, I would love to see more stuff come out of her Soldier Son books. Her Soldier Son books are a trilogy that she wrote that's separate from The Realm of the Elderlings, about a young man named Navarre who has to go to military academy. He finds himself kind of locked into both sides of this conflict taking place between his people and then the people that his family and the members of his nobility and aristocratic class have colonized. And he finds himself involved in this conflict in both very serious physical ways, but also very spiritual ways. Very, very interesting. Just kind of one of the smartest, sleekest fantasy trilogies I've ever read. And I just really wish there was more to it and more books in it, because I just think there's more. You know, the way that she kind of wrote The Realm of the Elderlings, she took little things that like she mentioned in the first trilogy, and then she ballooned that by going into that world and looking deep into that other part that maybe she just mentioned in the first trilogy. And I feel like there's room to do that with the Soldier Son books in ways that would be really interesting and fun. But unfortunately, those books were not a commercial success, so I can't imagine that's going to happen. But it would be my dream.
Yeah, I also had a Robin Hobb book. Sorry, Jen. I said the Rainbow Chronicles, which is the fourth series in the Realm of the Elderlings kind of like universe. And the reason is, in the Rainbow Chronicles, basically what happens is there's a bunch of people who have kind of a genetic, like something wrong with them. They're all kind of like outcasts in society, and they sort of go off and they start to live their own sort of life basically, and then they sort of create this new society where they can sort of do whatever they want. They're not outcasts, they're all just like together there. And the plot of the books are not actually about that itself. They're about a bunch of dragons who are also involved. But I felt that at the point where it ends, they've kind of reached this new city where they are. They're like this whole new society. They've got all these ideas. They're kind of renewing this city. And I felt there's a lot more that could be done with these people as they get older, because they're all quite young when this happens. So that's definitely the one that I would choose to hear more from.
My answer's probably quite quick because I don't read series, and I feel like the last series that I probably read in its entirety was The Hunger Games, and I don't wish there were more of those. So that's fine. The only other books that I've read in recent years that even have a prequel actually is Practical Magic, but I think she's called Alice Hoffman, the author, and I read the prequel to that back to back maybe 2 years ago, but I have a terrible memory, so actually I don't remember those books very well, so this is why I tend to read standalone. But I think next year I definitely want to just get my teeth into a series. So come back to me next year, maybe I'll have an answer.
I'm going to go really rogue and not pick a series on purpose, because actually I would have really loved there to be more of Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, because I think that whole world is a really, really interesting concept. So if you're not familiar, the whole book centres around a sort of dystopian version of the world where human cloning is allowed, and the bodies of clones are used for health benefits for people who are not clones, basically. And I just think that entire world and that entire concept is so interesting. And it's a really quite short book, I think, either to kind of build that into a bit more of a series where you kind of learn how we got to that point, or the background of it, or what happens next to a couple of the characters who don't meet their end in the book, I think would be really, really interesting. Or just for the novel itself to have just been longer, because it's so good. It's really, really wonderful piece of literature. I would love more of it.
That's a good answer. The film of that is very good as well.
Great film. Really great film.
The next question is really difficult. Well, I find it really difficult. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
I've got one. that is a bit recent, and very sadly, we lost Dame Hilary Mantel on Friday, which is just devastating. I'm a huge fan of the Thomas Cromwell books, and for the past, 10, 15 years, she's been such a giant in the literary world that it feels like this just incalculable loss. She didn't just write great trilogy, she regularly came out with these articles in the Guardian and other newspapers on different subjects, and she was just such a insightful, brilliant mind. And I would just love to be in the presence of that level of brilliance just once in my life. Not that I even think that I would have much to say in conversation with her or anything, but I would like to share something that I shared on my Instagram, which was an interview I saw with Hilary Mantel with the New York Times Review. And she was asked to describe her ideal reading experience. And I don't think I've read anything just so beautiful and wonderful and thoughtful. And I don't know, it just goes to show the kind of mind and person she was, that she took this question so seriously to write something like this in response. Because I mean, like, I feel like I would have just been like, oh, coffee and tea, but she really just came up with the most brilliant response to this. She said, "I'd like to be at home, in my apartment by the sea in Devon, just a few yards from the waves, sitting in the sunshine by a window, smiling and picking up some vast immersive novel, like Sarah Waters' Fingersmith, a book which, when it was new, I read as if I were a child, utterly thrilled and beguiled by it. In my ideal reading day, there would be no time limit, no email stacking up, and dinner would appear on a floating tablecloth, as if brought by spirit hands. In practice, this never happens. I read in snatched hours on trains or late at night, or purposefully and on a schedule, with pen in hand and a frown of concentration. But when I think harder, my ideal reading experience would involve time travel. I'd be 14, and in my hand would be the orange tickets that admitted to the adult section of the public library. Everything would be before me, and I would be ignorant of the shabby little compromises that novelists make, and I would be unaware that many nonfiction books are just rehashes of previous books by other writers. My eyes would be fresh. I would be chasing glory." What a response. What a mind. Just rest in peace, Dame Hilary Mantel.
Oh, we should have ended on you, Chris.
Oh.
Because that's a nice
Yeah,
one.
great answer.
I find this really hard, this question, but I've written down Miriam Margolyes, mainly because I think she's bloody brilliant, and she drops the C word with wild abandon. And if you've ever seen her videos that go around, that what is that? It's an app or something where people pay to have like a video sent to them, Cameo, and they're just bloody brilliant. And I just think she'd be wild, and you just have such an unpredictable time with her and an unpredictable conversation. She played Professor Sprout in the Harry Potter films, if anybody doesn't know who she is, and go and seek out her Cameo videos that appear on Twitter and TikTok and all sorts of places.
I can't talk about it in too much detail on the podcast because it is extremely vulgar, but if you want to have a riotous laugh, you need to watch her interview where she's talking about when she met Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, I've seen that on Graham Norton. It's disgusting.
It was hilarious. I'm
writing that down.
Was in tears.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Very NSFW, but if you're not at work, you need to listen. Very funny.
Yeah, what about you, Alice?
I'm going to go really basic, and I'm going to pick the Obamas because I just think they're great. And I actually think in comparison to most kind of world leaders and like high society people, you could actually have a proper good chat with them, like a really good conversation. And like all of Barack Obama's like music lists and book lists that he puts out each summer are so good that I think you could really chat to him about and get some really, really good preferences and recommendations and everything, as well as talking about what it was like to meet various people and actually be in the White House and all that kind of stuff. And I just think they'd be great fun to have dinner with, like genuinely good fun. I think they'd get you really drunk too.
I was literally going to say, I bet the cocktails would be flowing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're the type of people that have that like charm about them that makes you feel good about yourself. Like they make you feel good about you, and it's a very interesting kind of thing. They're very much charmers, both of them.
Absolutely, 100%. What about you, Sarah?
Mine would be Eric Kandel, who's a neuroscientist he's retired now, but he won a Nobel Prize for his work about how memory works, like on a cellular level. That's not why I would want to talk to him, but that's what he's like sort of famous for.
Sounds interesting though.
It is interesting. That's not what yeah. You can look that up on Wikipedia. But yeah, the reason that I would want to talk to him is that I read his memoir so I'm a neuroscientist, if for anyone who doesn't know, and when I finished my bachelor's degree, my supervisor at the time gave me his memoir, and where he talks about his years running a lab that eventually won a Nobel Prize, and how it was to work there, and like what happened, and how he made all these incredible discoveries. But the thing that impacted me so much in his memoirs, he talks a lot about the price of academia and what it cost him on a personal level. And he goes into a lot of detail about his relationship with his wife and how he, as a father, he was like so absent. And he talks super frankly about how they nearly split up and just the incredible personal cost that it was to him to like have this incredible career. And it was the first time I'd ever seen someone talk, because obviously I was at the time like an aspiring scientist and you look up to people like that so much, and it was the first time I'd ever heard someone talk so frankly about the reality of that and what that actually means in terms of being an older person and like looking back at your life. His wife said that she would leave him at one point unless he was home by 7 p.m. on Sundays. That was like the pullback where he started to get a bit of his work-life balance back, which meant that he was working like 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. every single day. 7 days a week, which is just incredible. It was really impactful to me to read it at a time where I was like deciding where I would study and what I would do with my career. Just reading this super honest thing about the reality of that kind of life. So I would definitely like to talk to him.
It's a cool one. I'm reading Stephen King's almost like memoir, his book on writing at the moment. I'm listening to it, and he talks about a similar sort of thing, because I mean it's pretty well known that his life was wasted to a certain extent whenever he was writing Cujo and the like, but he's really strict with his days for the benefit of his family. He just doesn't take his writing into the evenings at all.
We gotta hurry up, you guys. We've done 2 questions, Jesus.
Yeah, I was gonna say we need to pick up the pace.
Are your bookshelves full of books yet to be read, or are they full of your favourites, Chris?
Yet to be read. I own over 700 books, and in fact, yesterday I actually had to reorganize my entire bookshelf because they had gotten completely out of control. It took me 4.5 hours. I will never, ever, ever, ever let them get to this point again. It's a bad habit. And if anybody feels like they have a bad book buying habit, they need to just look at what's happening in my life, and then they'll feel instantly better about themselves.
I feel better about myself knowing you, Chris. Mine are a mix, but definitely more that are unread than read. But the ones I keep and don't give to like charity shops are ones that I really like and that I'd read again, or that I would like to lend to people.
Mine are about 50-50, I think, read to unread. I think I own a lot fewer than you guys do. I think I own about 50 or 60.
I think we've done this in a really great order because I think mine are almost entirely books I've read, and I only buy books when I've got space to read them, basically. So I've got a big stack. I will say I'm being quite literal here because my actual bookcases are full of books I've read. Books that I haven't read live in a stack on the floor. So I mostly, though, don't buy loads of books unless I've got time and space to read them. I keep a running list on my phone, so when I'm like, okay, I need to get something new, I just go to the list and buy them as I need them.
Yeah, you're very good, Alice. I remember your room when you lived in your flat was always like full of book stacks, but they were always like stacks of books that you'd already read and knew all about all of them.
I miss those book stacks. They were so chaotic, but I loved them.
Favourite childhood book?
I think me and Chris have had this discussion before. I wasn't even a huge reader as a child, but there's some books that I do remember reading, and they were always animals. What's the word when animals are like humans?
Anthropomorphic?
That's the one. So I would like the Red Wall books and a series called The Deptford Mice, by an author called Robin Jarvis, and I really like those as well. Those about mice and evil rats, and don't ask me the plot because I don't remember that bit, but yeah, those are the sort of books that I liked as a child. Kind of violent books through the lens of animals.
That's so niche and I love it so much. As in, my favourite sort of early childhood book is definitely The Tiger Who Came to Tea, and I buy it for like so many friends who are having new babies. It's such a good book. And as a young adult, the Babysitter's Club series, oh my god, I was obsessed with those books. They're not actually that good, but I was completely obsessed and had stacks and stacks and stacks of them and loved them.
You've reminded me that as an early teen, I had the Sweet Valley High books, which somebody sent me a stack of them, which I've got on my bookshelves. I keep meaning to reread them to see how awful they actually are.
Yeah, dreadful, I imagine. My favourite book when I was a kid was The Folk of the Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton, I think.
Oh, I love that one.
I absolutely loved it. And I also was a huge Babysitters Club fan, and there were hundreds of them. So, yeah, they really kept me busy from the ages of sort of 10 to 13 or something. I loved them.
Yeah, same, Sarah.
My favorite childhood book series was the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, aka Daniel Handler. Those were like my Harry Potter growing up. I started reading them around the time that I think the 6th book was coming out. My father, so we didn't have much money. We hardly ever bought books. The only time we ever bought books was when it was something that like the whole family wanted to read. And so the one exception was the series of Unfortunate Events. Every time a new book came out, we would pre-order it and then pick it up from the Books A Million, and my dad would buy me a Frappuccino from the cafe in the Books A Million. And so it's just lots of childhood memories kind of wrapped up into those books. And I think they're quite fun, and they're kind of dark in a way that's very inviting to children. Kind of plays on childhood anxieties in a way that's it allows children to kind of explore things that maybe they would otherwise feel uncomfortable exploring. So I think they're just very interesting books, and I think they've held up over the years.
I know that Roald Dahl famously did the exact same thing. His whole spiel was the reason his books are actually quite dark and horrible things happen to parents is because he thought it was really important for children to have like a safe way to be exposed to the not particularly nice things that happen in the world or horrible things that could happen, and know that actually quite often, even if not nice things do take place, everything can turn out okay in the end.
Yeah, and then circling back to Jenny with the Sweet Valley High books, if you want a really funny laugh, you should read one of the 2 of those as an adult and then go back and listen to the podcast Literary Disco. Years ago, one of their very early episodes, they read the Sweet Valley High and discussed it, and it's one of the funniest book discussion things I've ever listened to.
Oh, I'm going to have to do that. The other books that I remember reading as a child were the Goosebump books, and then those led on to the Point Horror books, and there's also a really good podcast called Teenage Scream where they go back and read the Point Horror books and have very funny conversations about them because they must be awful. I really don't remember them, but I imagine they're terrible.
I'm not going to list the books in the show notes that we talk about because there's way too many, but what I will do for people is that I'll put in the questions that we answer, and if we make a reference to a podcast or something, I'll put in the podcast that we mentioned, but I'm not going to do books this time. Sorry, all. If you didn't hear it, you can message us, I guess, if you really want to know. Thank you. Kieran sent a message, why does Sarah always threaten me with a good time, which I just thought was really funny.
That's incredible.
Good old Kieran. Every time I put a question box up, he fired something off that was just wacky.
Question 6. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck? Chris?
It's gotta be the 100 duck-sized horses. I mean, a horse-sized duck would definitely stomp you, and you would suffocate beneath the webbed feet pretty instantly, I think.
I just think that 100 duck-sized horses is an awful, awful lot.
I think they'd like ambush you.
I do too. I think you'd be trampled.
Just kick them little things.
Yeah, but that many.
100 is an awful lot of ducks.
I think a duck-sized horse would be like really clumsy and like lolloping around, and you could jump on its back like Legolas style.
Do you mean a horse-sized duck?
Are we allowed to be armed in this scenario?
I think so.
I'm gonna be armed.
Yeah, I'm gonna have like at least a club, you know.
Club, weapon of choice. I'd probably go for a gun if we're going for weapons.
That's a bit of a. I feel like a gun is a bit uneven match.
Okay.
I'm kind of imagining a sword.
A sword. What about you, Sarah?
I actually thought about this quite hard. If the animal's going to be aggressive, then I'd rather go for 1 horse-sized duck. But if they're not aggressive, I go for duck-sized horses because you could scare them away. But if they're going to attack you, I go for the 1.
Yeah, can you imagine like 100 rabid little horses? Terrifying.
Yeah.
This is where we take a little break to tell you about all of the different ways you can support the podcast, some of which are totally free. A really effective and easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There's a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcasts page where you can write a review. And if you listen on Spotify, you can now very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We are at Bookcast Club on both Twitter and Instagram. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter, where we share even more book recommendations and the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family all about us. If you wanted to support the podcast financially, we do also have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month, and we offer early access to the podcast, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalised book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey, and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. So fingers crossed, we'll get you something you like. We also send you books in the post. There are over 15 bonus episodes you can get instant access to if you sign up as a patron today. The link is also in our show notes. But however you choose to support us, we as always want to say a huge thank you, as we appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
The next question is, I would like to learn about the publishing industry. Do you have any plans on doing such an episode? Which is an interesting question.
I feel like
we did I was going to say, we did discuss at one point getting someone on that works in publishing.
Did we?
Yeah. I know me and Alice have basically discussed publishing in the past and just blasted out our opinions. But the episode that I recorded with Abigail Mann is probably the closest we've done to giving a bit of kind of real life insight into the publishing industry, so that's a good one to listen back to. But yeah, I think we probably should try and we probably could do it with the people that we know, is get somebody on that works in publishing. How much they'd be willing to reveal, I don't know.
I think as well it would depend on what specifically people want to know about the publishing industry, because if it's things like how does a book get published, it might be that that's something that we could get somebody to sort of chat through, as you say, with people we know, and we've talked a little bit about that with Abigail, as you say, Jenny. If it's more in detail and specific and kind of insider secrets, I think that would be tricky to...
That's where me and Alice speculate.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll think about it. Maybe next year we can think about doing an episode with Abby. I would recommend the podcast What Page You On, actually, because they're both authors, and they talk quite a lot about the publishing industry as kind of the machine of it, right, in terms of marketing and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in publishing, that might be a podcast that you enjoy, because they're both in the industry, so they're good ones to listen to.
And also, I would say, even though I'm not like the biggest fan of, I shouldn't dog them, like I don't listen to them regularly, but the Book Riot folks, they also, their main podcast will have a lot of different publishing news and stuff like that. If you're just trying to keep up with the industry and what's happening over the past 2 weeks, they do talk a lot about like different publishing news.
What's that called, Chris?
I think it's literally just called the Book Riot podcast, their main one, because they have a whole bunch of different podcasts, but the main one where it's like the girl and the guy whose names I've forgotten, that's just called the Book Riot podcast.
I will say, though, the interesting thing about this question for me is that if you do, as listeners, have things that you would like us to talk about on the podcast, please do let us know. We really like actually having suggestions for episodes. There's a lot that we could talk about, and it's really nice to know what you want us to talk about, because this makes it a more joyful experience for everyone involved. So please do send through your ideas.
Agree.
Well done, Alice.
Thanks. I was quite proud to remember to say that.
Next question is, apart from yourself, which author would you pick to write your life story? I don't think I would write my own story for a start.
Neither would I. I'm going to say Helen Fielding, because quite a lot recently friends of mine have said that my life reads like a sitcom. So I think Helen Fielding could do a very funny Bridget Jones's Diary style book about my life.
That's funny, because is it the next question? A couple of questions time, we'll be able to link back to the answer you just gave, Alice. I've written down, although maybe I couldn't have written this idea down. I'm like, could I do this myself? I've written down Kirsty Logan, and I really liked her short story collection. Oh, I should have written the name of the book down. Things We Say in the Dark?
I think so.
That's like a horror short story collection, but the stories are very much sort of centered on real life experiences. Like there's a whole, I can't quite remember how the book's broken up, but there's a whole section on like pregnancy and that kind of stuff. So I kind of thought I could just tell her all my life events and she could write really weird, macabre, fantastical stories about them. But now I'm wondering maybe if I should do that. My life's not that interesting. I only have about 2 or 3. But yeah, that's what I've written down.
I would have to say Anne Patchett, and the reason I would choose Anne Patchett, not just because I love her books, is that she has quite a knack for making an unextraordinary life feel extraordinary on the page, and I have definitely lived what would be called an unextraordinary life. So if anybody could somehow make that narratively interesting, it would be somebody like Anne Patchett.
Your life is fascinating, Chris.
Yeah.
That is totally untrue.
I don't think your life is unexciting at all.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
I stay home and read books and chill with my cat. So
Yeah, all right, sure. Let's just skip over the whole I grew up in a cult thing.
It's been years ago.
I haven't got an answer for this. I can't think of a good one. I might come back to that. I might answer it and put it in later if I can think of a question. If I can think of an answer.
Okay.
See if you can make that smooth.
Donna Tartt.
Yeah, I thought of Donna Tartt, but then I'm like, am I that obnoxious that I think that she would be the right writer for me? I mean, I am pretty obnoxious, so maybe.
You're not obnoxious.
In my head, I
No.
am. Alice. You just say that because I say you're my favourite all the time.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question is very interesting. Favorite time of day to read and favorite place to read?
When I'm meant to be doing something else.
Isn't that the truth?
That's my favourite time of day to read, is any time I'm meant to be doing something else. In the spirit of the Hilary Mantel answer, in an ideal world, it is on my sofa with a cup of tea on a Sunday afternoon when it's raining and all this kind of stuff. In practice, I love making use of my commute to read, whether that's a physical book or an audiobook, because it's a really great way of getting some personal time in to a really boring and annoying part of the day.
I love reading in the morning, but I never get to do it because I don't wake up early enough, because I wake up so late that I just have to get to work. And then on the weekends, I'm usually up north visiting my family. And so I still don't get to really read in the morning anymore. But I used to, back when I was on a decent sleep schedule, I actually used to wake up early enough that I would spend a whole hour and a half in the morning just reading a book with my cup of coffee. And it just felt like the best way to start my day. And I never get to do it anymore. And it's really sad. So I usually just read in the evenings now. But I would love to get back to that. But I don't know if I'll ever be the type of person that wakes up at 6 a.m. again.
I've never tried that. That sounds really cool. I never would go anywhere near a book in the morning, but maybe I should try that. That sounds great. I really like to read immediately after dinner, which is really, it makes me feel like some kind of I don't know, person from a Victorian novel, finishing dinner, sitting on the couch at 7:30 and reading for half an hour. Just feel like we're in some, I don't know, living in the 50s or earlier, and I really, really like it. I feel like it sets me up. If I sit down and watch TV while I'm eating my dinner and then I watch something else, I feel not great. But if I read a book for half an hour, then I feel great.
You withdraw to the reading
Exactly,
room.
yeah. That's very much me, as you know.
Well, prior to having a baby, I always read in bed in the evenings, which is quite hard to do with a small person. But I like morning reading as well, and specifically pre-children on holiday in some nice cottage somewhere. If I happen to have woken up earlier than everyone else, then yeah, it's really nice to read by yourself in the morning with a coffee. Yeah, looking at the mountains in the Lake District from the back garden. But when that will ever happen again, who knows?
Once your children are teenagers, which isn't that long, and they won't get out of bed first thing in the morning.
That sounds lovely.
That's actually the best, is when you're on vacation and you're staying in a place that has a porch or somewhere where you can be outside. That morning outdoor fresh air, first cup of coffee reading session is the best.
Sounds so good.
I'm going to try this week. I've never done this before.
Oh, absolutely. You must.
Go on your balcony if you could still.
Yeah, I was on my balcony just before, actually. Okay, the next question is, which fictional character would your teenage and present-day selves most relate to?
I wasn't quite sure if they meant when I was a teenager. I don't know. I didn't quite understand the question. When I was a teenager, I wish I didn't think I had to be cool. So I don't know if there's a character in the literary world that would fulfill that. But I have definitely written down characters that I can relate to. So I've written Rebecca Bloomwood down, who's from the Shopaholic books.
Jenny, that's excellent.
But that was scarily me in probably my early mid-20s, just spending money that I didn't have. And yeah, that was definitely me back then. And I've written Bridget Jones down, just because she's just a bit of a mess and a bit all over the place, and Not so much now, but definitely in my kind of 20s up to my 30s. I think the fact that I enjoyed those characters so much means that I probably was a little bit like them.
I think less as a teenager, more as kind of, if I'd had this book when I was in like my very early 20s, and it's non-fiction, so it's, I'm not sure it really answers the question, but I really related to Dolly Alderton in Everything I Know About Love, particularly that kind of when you first move to London and your friends are everything and it's all just chaos and difficult but so much fun. I mean, I will say at the time when I first moved to London, I had a really hard time. I found it really, really hard. My mental health took a massive, massive tumble. But in hindsight, there was also so much fun, like so much fun, absolutely chaotic evenings and amazing friendships, a lot of whom I'm still very, very close with now, nearly 10 years later. So that was that. Yeah, so I'm going to say that as for my teens. And now I don't know. I really struggled with this question because I don't necessarily find myself relating very specifically to characters and finding myself really clearly represented. But there's always elements of people that I'm like, oh, that's a bit like me and that's a bit like me. So I'm just going to leave it there, I think.
Sorry, my neighbour appears to be playing some kind of pan flute outside my
That's
window.
incredible. I can't hear it.
So if you could hear whimsical music, I apologise. They're down. I don't know what is happening. Anyway, I read this question briefly last night, and then it sent me. I kind of misread it, and then it sent me on this whole spiral of when I was in the shower, thinking in detail about like representation in fiction and what book I wish I'd read as a teenager, and like the state of the publishing industry today, and what I wish was different when I was a kid.
So much more details than anything Jenny or I have said.
And yeah, I went Rebecca Bloomwood.
Oh, I got deep and kind of dark. Anyway, let's get out of that. For me, I'm sort of interpreting this as like, which character would you like give your teenage self to read or something? Yeah, anyone who, kind of like what you said, Jen, who's like, calm down, don't worry, it's all fine. Don't panic about like finding someone to be with or like relationships or like worrying about yourself too much. It's all gonna be good. Don't worry too much.
I've gone with a TV show. I'm just totally breaking from books, but it says fictional character, so I feel like it's got to be Patrick from the HBO show Looking. Have you guys seen Looking?
No.
Not at all. I've not even heard of it.
It only got 2 seasons, and then they wrapped it up with a movie because HBO just didn't continue it. It was very depressing, but it was basically, the way I describe it, it was like the TV show Girls, which I don't know if you guys saw Girls, but instead of focusing on millennial women in New York, it focused on gay men in San Francisco. But it's a very dramedy with a very similar humor style. And the main character in that show is a guy named Patrick, and he's played by Jonathan Groff, who, there's something about Jonathan Groff that I just instantly find very relatable, like just the way his acting and kind of presence is. But the character in particular is just like the most nervous Purvis kind of character. And it's just kind of a disaster, but in a way that I find very relatable. Like every time I watch him, I'm like, oh, you're such an idiot, but I get it. There's something about him that I just find relatable. And my teenage self I would have found him relatable as a teenager. Well, I did find him relatable as a teenager. I watched it when I was like 19. So yeah, definitely Looking. Patrick.
Sorry, I'm just looking up Jonathan Groff. I was like, I know that name. Glee. That's what I know him from.
Yeah, he was in Glee, and he was in Hamilton. He played the king in Hamilton.
Yeah.
He's also in Frozen, Jenny.
God, he's in everything.
God, I've watched that film so many times. 3-year-old.
He's
America's gay guy next door. I love him.
Right. Which fictional... Nope. Is there a character you... No, again. Is there a character that you ever... Fucking hell. Is there a character that you wished... Fuck's sake.
Please keep all of this in.
Is there a character that you wish you could be for a day, or a world that you wish you could live in for a day? Another great question, actually.
I've got one. I don't know why I do this to myself. I was like, I would really like to go to the hotel that was used as the Overlook Hotel in The Shining.
Jenny!
I've written down the Overlook Hotel, but I mean, in reality, I think that'd be really quite traumatic.
That's so good. Is this pre or after? Like what stage of it being of The Shining sort of happening? Would you be?
Oh, the full on. Let's do it. Let's have like a haunted hotel experience and just do the full. He's completely lost it. Here's Johnny. That bit. We'll go in hard.
God.
apparently the room doesn't exist in the hotel. They got rid of it.
I've never seen The Shining. I don't even know the premise of The Shining. I'm terrified of horror films.
I have no interest in watching it, but I do know the premise.
It's my favourite film ever. So he's a caretaker that looks after the hotel during the winter season, so they're the only people that live there. And the Overlook Hotel is like a character in itself, but he slowly but surely starts to kind of lose the plot in this hotel. And horrible things happen in it.
When I was a teenager, it was a total like rite of passage to be able to say that you'd seen The Shining. It was one of those films, which is why I watched it when I was way too young. So, it had to be cool.
I don't feel like inviting Satan into my house. I'll pass.
I kind of agree.
No one's going to come with me on the tour.
Categorically no, Jenny.
I think it's a normal hotel.
Still don't want to stay there.
What's your answer, Chris?
Well, I actually changed answers last night. I wasn't going to go with a different one, but then last night I started rereading The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and I haven't read that book in years, and it's not like one of my favorite books, but I just was wanting something cozy and something familiar, so I just decided to like reread it. And I read 150 pages in one sitting, which is like unheard of for me. Like I just don't generally do that. I'm the type of person that takes a lot of breaks while I'm reading. And I just loved being in the world. There's something about, I don't know if you guys have read that one, but there's something about the way magic is described, and it's all like quite familiar fantasy settings, but described in this just very lush detail. And it just made me feel so comforted, even though quite dark things happen in that book right from the get-go, quite scary things. But I was really just loving it. And when he gets to the university and stuff like that, it all just feels so cozy and wonderful, and I would love that.
Sarah, I'm going to jump in because I wonder if we have a similar answer. I would like to be Richard Peyton for a day. But everything kicking off, I think it would be really interesting to do that for those first few weeks at Hampton College. This is from The Secret History for anyone who's not picked up on that reference. And I just think it sounded like such a cool setting and such an interesting way to study. But obviously, I'd like out before everything starts kicking off.
Before you murder someone.
Yeah.
Cool answer. I would love to go to Vermont in real life, actually, thanks to that book. I love the setting of it. I would choose actually somewhere fantastical. I'm always super taken by like magic and shit. I just kind of want to have magic for a day. So any character that can do cool stuff, I would want to be. And specifically, I always really want anyone who can like teleport. I always loved like the Flu Network and stuff in Harry Potter where you can like actually go somewhere. I guess this comes from like living the other side of the world to my family, but yeah, I would love like teleportation. That would definitely be my any character that can teleport and quickly get places. That would be me.
That would be cool and useful.
Oh, and then Kieran asked another question. Who is your favourite Welsh book reviewer?
I did remind him that I was from Wales.
Yeah, I was like, Jenny.
I'd also like to point out that I'm also Welsh.
Oh, are you? I didn't know that.
My dad is.
She's claiming it.
I am half Welsh. I could play for Wales in sports if I wanted to. So you basically have to pick between me and Jenny.
Okay, so Alice's favourite Welsh reviewer is herself. Jenny's favourite Welsh reviewer is herself. Who's yours, Chris?
Chris has probably got Welsh roots somewhere.
I like both Jenny and Kieran, but I can't pick a favorite.
Oh, not Alice. Yeah, me too. Fair enough.
Not me.
Already forgot that Alice is claiming Welsh heritage. I was thinking people from Wales.
I'm mortally offended, Chris. I'm mortally offended.
All three equally.
We love Kieran.
Yeah, we love all of you guys.
I don't like any of you. Okay, next question.
Thanks, Sarah. Bringing us back to earth.
I mean, Kieran might actually genuinely be one of the better reviews that I watch.
Yeah, I think he is.
Don't tell him that though.
Yeah,
Should I cut that
cut
out?
that out. Yeah, don't let his ego go.
The next question really made me laugh. It came from Akinyi, who is the person who makes Semi-Scribbled Pod, which is one of our favourite podcasts. We will link it in the show notes. It's a fantastic podcast. And she said, how do you get over a reading slump and episode production freeze?
No, bless her. So we do the first bit first, the reading slump.
I have to say, if you're encountering a reading slump, before you even try and fix it, I think you need to ask yourself, are you really in a reading slump in the sense that you really want to read and you're not able to, or are you just enjoying other things right now? Because I think as somebody who, like, people who consume a lot of bookish media on the internet or make bookish media themselves, they are in the habit of thinking that you kind of have to read all the time. But that's not how most people live their lives. Even people who work in books and all that different stuff, like that is just not the way people think or behave. But it's easy to think that when your Instagram feed is just nothing but people reading books, right? So ask yourself, are you really in a reading slump, or are you just enjoying something else right now? If you're just enjoying something else right now, just ride with it. It's really fine. But if you're really in the sense of like, I'm trying to read and I can't, my biggest piece of advice is like the old faithful, try something that you've read before and loved. Or sometimes when I'm in a reading slump, what I've actually found is that I'm anxious about something, and so my attention span isn't good. That's typically one of the biggest problems for me with reading slumps. And so I just set myself a timer, and I'm like 20 minutes. And I know I can read for 20 minutes. I just have to like set the timer for myself and do it, and just kind of get in that habit again of having focused reading time.
I didn't really have anything different. I thought about it and I was like, well, you could read kind of magazine articles, it's still reading, but at the end of the day, if it's because you don't want to be reading right now, then don't read. Go and do something else. Go and watch a load of films. Like I've done it before, just got obsessed with some like film series instead. Like that's fine, particularly if you don't put content out about books. There's a bit more pressure on us, because if all of us had a reading slump that involved not reading any books at the same time, we might have a slight problem. But yeah, just don't put pressure on it.
My answer was going to be, in terms of the production freeze, have more hosts. Because the fact that there's 4 of us means that if one of us is having a massive slump, it's not a major problem for us, because we also theme our episodes in a way that we can always hark back to something that you've read previously. So I think not making everything about what you're exactly currently reading also helps with that. Be YA novels, be books to films, whatever. There's always something that you can talk about, and quite often it doesn't necessarily rely on you having read exactly that thing when you're about to talk about it.
Yep.
And that helps a lot.
I feel like also if we got into a situation where all 4 of us were not reading, we probably would do an episode about that and be like, what's going on?
Yeah, everything's content.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I think that's a really excellent point about reading fluctuating and sort of going in seasons. My biggest point for this is, if you feel that you're not feeling like reading, think about what you're currently reading. Are you stuck in the middle of this book that is not bringing you joy, that you're not motivated? And if that is true, please DNF it, get rid of it. It's not going to go anywhere. You can go back to it in 5-10 years if you feel like it. But if there's a book that's getting you down and it feels like homework and you don't want to go back to it, get rid of it. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's the greatest novel of all time. If it's not for you at that moment, it's just not going to work. You're just going to be miserable. And I totally agree. I think all 4 of us for sure definitely go through fluctuations with reading, and it's probably doesn't seem like it because we put out episodes super consistently, but that's not really the case, and we kind of are careful about how we manage that. And so it can sort of give this perception that we all read all the time, but that's definitely not true. Yeah, for me personally, I can have my focus goes up and down a lot depending on other things that are going on. So sometimes it's just I just cannot sit down and read for 15-20 minutes. It just doesn't help. But then I also use timers a little bit. If it's the fact that I'm having trouble focusing and I know that that's the issue, then I use timers sometimes. And the other thing I do is, if I feel like I'm not enjoying stuff and I'm not feeling motivated to read things, that nothing's inspiring me, then I often reread. And to be honest, I often reread The Secret History. That's what I would go back to.
Yep, absolutely. The other last piece of advice I would give is that one old faithful of getting out of a book slump if nothing else is working is read a thriller. There is something about a thriller that will pull you out of a reading slump just because it's so plotty, so pacey. And, thrillers are not my favorite genre, but I have in the past been known to just read a really fast airport thriller to get you out of it.
The only other thing I was going to say about production in terms of the podcast and getting episodes out is, we might not sound like we do, but we really do plan ahead. We sit down together at the start of the year and basically pencil in all the episodes for the year ahead, and they change all the time. The hosts change, the themes change, the topics change, but yeah, we definitely really plan what we're doing. And then if we do have kind of prescriptive reading that we have to read, then we know it's coming. It takes a bit of the pressure off it.
I have to say, for me, doing this podcast, that's completely essential. I'm fine with prescriptive reading, but I find it really stressful to suddenly have to read a whole heap. So if I knew, for example, that we were going to do, let's say, a thriller episode in 6 months' time, that's totally fine, and I would probably intentionally pick up quite a few thrillers between now and then, but to suddenly have to read them, I just would absolutely hate that, and that would take a lot of the joy out of it for me. So for me, that forward planning is really essential, and actually feeling a bit spontaneous. Otherwise you just kind of end up reading stuff that you have to all the time. I guess also collaborate with other podcasts that you like us, can you?
Like us.
Last question is my question. I thought this might be fun. Favorite and least favorite thing about doing the podcast?
That Australian woman that records with us sometimes. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I also didn't specify if that was my favourite or least favourite thing, Sarah. Just to say,
I think we knew.
Put those middle fingers back down.
Oh dear.
my favorite thing is honestly, I just love talking to you guys. Like, I mean, it's nice that we record this and put it out for the world, but if we were just meeting, every once in a while to talk about books, I would absolutely love it still. I like just kind of chatting with you guys. This is both my favorite and least favorite thing, actually. I love the responses we get. I like that. But at the same time, coming from somebody who does a YouTube channel, my least favorite thing is that those responses are so dispersed. You know what I'm trying to say? There's all these different places we're getting them from. Whereas, like, when I have a channel, somebody just comments directly on a video. I know exactly what they're responding to. Like, that conversation is more like easy to manage, whereas like this is coming all over the place, you know what I'm trying to say. And sometimes, I don't know, it can feel a little bit like it's harder to feel like you're in a conversation just because of that. But I do love hearing the responses that people have to the episodes and all of that. It's really, really lovely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I was thinking, what do I not enjoy about it? Because actually, I love recording with you guys. I like editing. I love that side of it. I like planning. Like, I do really enjoy it. Sometimes editing can get just put a face. Sometimes editing can get stressful because we really do try and publish on the day that we set. I mean, sometimes it's gone astray, but it can get stressful when we can't get a date in and it's getting up to the deadline. But you're right, Chris, and that's the bit that perhaps people don't realise about podcasts, is in terms of feedback from people, it's really difficult. It's even things like stats, you just can't, they're not particularly real. You have to like average out how many people are listening to episodes. Like Chris was saying, you get comments, but they come in from, if we didn't have social media, we might just feel like we're, talking into a void, because don't get the same response you do as you do on YouTube, because there is no collective way of doing that. It's like getting people to write reviews is really difficult because it's difficult to do. Like, it's not a logical system to write a review for a podcast. You have to do it on Apple Podcasts. Well, I don't have an Apple phone, so it's things like that that are really frustrating about podcasting, and a lot of it is just kind of getting a feel and looking and trying to get some useful statistics from what you have access to, because it's really not very much.
Yeah, we love it when you guys message us on Instagram and stuff. It's really great. So it would be so cool if you could comment, I don't know, below, do the YouTube equivalent, but you can't, unfortunately. So yeah, please message us. We love it.
I was going to say my least favourite thing is the scheduling. It's such a pain sometimes. We're all in such different places and on quite different schedules, so sometimes it is challenging.
Yep,
but
for sure.
Of all of the things that could be my least favourite things about this, it's a really minor one, and it's something that we can quite easily manage most of the time. And my favourite thing is similarly getting to chat to you lovely people about books.
Yeah, I think that scheduling thing, Alice, is like one of the strengths of this podcast, is that we're all so different from different places, but it's also really annoying because we're very far apart from each other time-wise.
Mainly Chris.
Yeah, mainly Chris. Not talking about anyone in particular.
Chris can't unmute himself. Well, the technology can be really annoying sometimes too.
Chris is shocked.
It's fine, we're still recording, but Chris might not come back.
Whatever. So that was it. Thank you so much for your questions. It was a lot of fun for us to answer them. And if you have any others, or if you have, as Alice said, episode ideas or any feedback or recommendations, we would love to hear them. You can email us at thebookcastclub@outlook.com, or you can contact us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Bookcast Club on both of those. You can also sign up to our newsletter or check out our Patreon. The links for those are in the show notes. And as I said, I'm not going to link the books this time, but any of the podcasts or anything like that we talked about will all be in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening, and we will talk at you guys again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.